The sun hung low over the jagged cliffs of Redstone Valley, casting long shadows over the rough terrain. Dust kicked up from the dry earth, swirling like a ghostly fog as the wind howled through the craggy rocks. Jake O'Connor rode slowly, his horse's hooves grinding into the parched soil. The cowboy's sharp eyes scanned the land, the muscles in his back tight from hours of riding under the blistering heat. Jake had been riding this route for years. The dusty trail leading into the valley was one he knew like the back of his hand. He knew every rock, every dry creek bed, every twisted tree standing as a silent witness to the land harshness. And he knew what to expect when he reached the homestead. But today, as he crested a hill that overlooked his land, something was different. The smoke. It rose from the heart of his ranch, thick and black, a curling vortex that twisted into the sky. Jake's heart dropped into his gut. Not again. He didn't need to see the flames to know what was happening. His eyes, trained from years on the frontier, caught the telltale signs of fire that would consume everything it touched. He kicked his horse into motion. "Come on, oil red," Jake muttered through clenched teeth, urging the animal into a gallop. His mind raced as they tore down the trail, memories of the last fire, the one that nearly destroyed him, flooding back with haunting clarity. The smoke, the screams, the helplessness. He couldn't let it happen again, not after all he'd fought for. When the house came into view, Jake's breath hitched. The smoke was pouring out of the barn, the stable, the outbuildings, all in flames, the heat radiating from the inferno, visible even from a distance. His ranch, his life, was burning before him, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. Then he heard it, a voice, a woman's voice, rising above the roar of the fire, cutting through the chaos with desperation. "Jake, help me, please." It was Tess. Jake's chest tightened. His pulse hammered in his ears. "Tess." His head spun, and for a moment, time seemed to slow. Tess was inside, trapped. He pulled Oil Red to a stop and dismounted, stumbling as his boots hit the ground. Sweat dripped into his eyes, but he didn't care. Every muscle in his body screamed, but he shoved it all aside. There was no time for weakness. He had to move. The flames crackled, a beast with insatiable hunger. Jake's boots hit the dirt as he ran toward the stable, where Tessa's cries still echoed, desperate and fearful. He could see her through the haze, her face pressed against the wooden slats, eyes wide with terror. Her voice was barely audible over the crackle of the fire, but he heard her clear enough. "Jake, please, I can't breathe," she gasped, her face pale and strained with fear. Jake's heart thudded in his chest. He froze for a split second, that moment when doubt gnawed at the edges of his resolve. The last time he'd tried to save someone, it had cost him everything. He couldn't lose Tess, too. Not like this. "God help me," he muttered under his breath. The hesitation that gripped him vanished as the sound of the collapsing roof echoed behind him. The heat was unbearable, and yet he pushed forward. Through the thick smoke, he saw her. Tess, her beautiful face contorted in agony, her breath shallow and rapid as she fought to stay conscious. She was trapped, the wooden beams groaning above her, threatening collapse at any moment. "I'm coming for you, Tess," he shouted, but she didn't hear. The fire roared louder, drowning out his words. He stumbled forward, nearly blinded by the smoke, the world around him becoming a fiery blur. The heat pressed against him, burning his skin, but he didn't stop. Tess needed him. A beam cracked above him, falling to the side with a deafening crash. He didn't flinch. His hand shot out, grabbing Tessa's arm through the gap, pulling her toward him with every ounce of strength he had left. She cried out, but the fire kept pushing at them both, its claws digging deeper. With one final effort, he pulled her from the wreckage, stumbling backward into the dirt. Her body was limp, her face ghostly pale, but she was alive. Her breaths were ragged, and her eyes fluttered weakly, but she was alive. "Tess, stay with me," Jake murmured, cradling her against his chest, his heart racing. Her fragile body trembled in his arms as the fire continued to rage behind them. He looked over her shoulder at the stable, the flames licking higher and higher. There was no saving it now. His ranch, his home, was gone, and yet Tess was alive. He'd saved her. But as he looked down at her, something else stirred deep within him. His hesitation had been short-lived. The guilt, the doubt, all of it vanished the moment their eyes met. "Tess," Jake whispered again, his voice thick with emotion. "I couldn't lose you." Her eyes flickered open, confusion clouding her expression. Her lips parted to speak, but no words came. Jake, still kneeling in the dust, felt her pulse weak under his fingers, and yet he knew he had to act fast. He wasn't sure how long he could keep this up. His heart, though heavy with loss, pulsed with an undeniable desire, a need to protect her, to fight for her. The attraction he'd kept buried for so long now surged to the surface. His hesitation had been fleeting, and now he knew the truth. Tess wasn't just another person he was saving. She was everything he had left. As the sun began to set over the smoldering ruins of his ranch, Jake's thoughts turned to the future, to the woman in his arms, and to the burning desire that had taken root deep in his soul. His gaze shifted from the remnants of the fire to Tessa's trembling form, and in that moment, everything became clear. He would rebuild, not just his ranch, but everything that had been lost. His hesitation had been short-lived, and now the only thing that mattered was her. There would be no more second-guessing, no more waiting. His desire was too strong, his will unbroken, and Tess would be at his side, alive, safe, and his, no matter what it took. The smoke and the fire still clung to the air, the remnants of destruction dancing in the sky like a reminder of everything that had been lost. Jake's chest heaved as he continued to hold Tess against him, the weight of the world pressing down on him. But there was something else, something more immediate, pressing closer than the ashes and the heat, the woman in his arms. Her trembling body was like a flame that had barely survived the storm, and Jake felt every pulse of her fragile heart beneath his fingertips. For a moment, everything else faded. The burned-out wreckage of his ranch, the danger they'd narrowly escaped. All that mattered was Tess. Tess and the overwhelming need to protect her, to keep her close, to make sure she never felt this kind of terror again. His lips parted, but the words didn't come easily. He wasn't a man for declarations, for grand gestures or emotional outbursts. But what he felt in this moment, the raw, undeniable pull toward her, was something he couldn't ignore. "Tess," he whispered again, his voice rougher than he intended. His hand cupped her cheek, gently brushing away the soot and sweat from her face. And for the first time, he allowed himself to lean closer, the warmth of her skin seeping into his own. "I've been fighting you for so long. But I can't anymore. Not after this." Tessa's eyes fluttered. Her lips parted slightly as if she was trying to find the words to respond. But the exhaustion in her body was overwhelming. She tried to speak, but it was as though she had no strength left. Jake's heart clenched, and his grip on her tightened. He couldn't bear to see her like this. Not when she had been so strong, so fearless in the face of the fire, and now so vulnerable in his arms. He couldn't stop himself. The emotions he had buried deep inside him for so long surged forward, taking control. "I'm not letting you go," he said, his voice low and fierce, filled with conviction. "Not now, not ever. You're not alone anymore, Tess. You don't have to face this world alone." Her eyes finally locked with his, her gaze blurry with pain, but also full of something else, something raw, something that mirrored his own hunger. And for the briefest of moments, the space between them seemed to shrink until the world fell away. Jake's pulse quickened, the heat between them palpable as if the fire was still raging in the distance, still burning through his veins. He wanted to kiss her, to feel the weight of her against him, to claim what he denied himself for so long. His hesitation had been short-lived, and now there was nothing left to hold him back. But Tess wasn't ready. He could see it in her eyes, the wariness, the lingering fear. She wasn't the kind of woman who would rush into something, even with everything they'd just survived. She wasn't like that. Jake took a slow, steadying breath, his forehead resting against hers. His fingers trailed lightly along her jawline, gentle and unhurried. He wanted to respect her, to give her space to breathe, to heal. This wasn't about just a moment. It was about building something real, something lasting. "Tell me what you need, Tess," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "I'll give you everything. Everything you need." She was quiet for a long moment, her breath hitching as she took in his words. Then, softly, her voice came to the quiet haze, barely more than a whisper. I need you to promise me. You'll be here, not just for today, not just for the fire. I need you to stay. Jake's heart stuttered in his chest. The weight of her words sank deep into his soul. She was asking for something more than just his presence. She was asking for his heart, for his commitment. And in this moment, as he held her close, feeling the warmth of her skin against his, he knew he couldn't give her anything less. I promise, he murmured, his lips brushing against her temple, tender and full of an emotion he hadn't fully recognized until now. I'll stay, Tess. I'll never leave you. Not like this. Not ever. And as the night deepened, the two of them stayed in the quiet of the world around them, their hearts beating in sync, their desires slowly kindling in the silence. The night had fallen heavy and still, the fire that had threatened to swallow everything now just a smoldering memory. The ranch stood in the distance, scarred but not defeated. Jake sat with Tess by the edge of the fire pit, the warmth of the dying embers casting flickering shadows on their faces. The moon was high in the sky, and everything felt distant. Yet, here, it felt as though the world had narrowed down to the two of them. Jake didn't know what to say. The things he wanted to say were stuck somewhere between his throat and his heart, tangled up with guilt and desire and 1,000 unspoken things. Tess was the first to speak, her voice soft, almost a whisper. Jake, what now? She shifted slightly, her gaze turning toward the horizon where the sun had set only hours ago. We made it through today, but tomorrow? What happens when the world doesn't stop for us? Jake could feel the weight of her words pressing down on him. He'd never been good at comforting. He'd spent his life riding alone, letting the silence of the open plains drown out the noise in his head. But with Tess, the silence fell heavier. He wanted to make her feel safe, wanted to wipe away the fear that still lingered in her eyes. But he didn't know how. He reached out, his hand brushing against hers, the touch so gentle it almost felt like a question. I don't have all the answers, he said, his voice low and thick with something he couldn't quite define. But I'll be here. I won't leave you. Tess met his gaze, her eyes searching his face for something. Her fingers intertwined with his, a soft but steady contact that spoke volumes. The moment lingered, heavy with the unspoken promise of what they both wanted. But there was still something holding her back. Fear, hesitation, the remnants of everything she had survived. Jake didn't push. He couldn't. He just held her hand and waited, letting the silence between them stretch, knowing that some things couldn't be rushed. The next few days were a blur of rebuilding. The ranch needed work, and Tess, despite her weariness, didn't shy away from it. Jake had expected her to be broken by everything she'd endured, but she was nothing like the woman he had imagined. Tess was fierce, determined, and resilient in ways he couldn't fully understand. As they worked side by side, their connection deepened. There were moments when their hands would brush, when the air between them would crackle with an electricity that neither of them could ignore, but neither of them spoke about it. It was a silent agreement. Neither of them was ready to cross that line. One evening, after a long day of repairs, Jake found himself standing beside Tess at the well. She had pulled off her gloves, and her hands were raw from working, her nails chipped and dirty, but she still looked beautiful to him, strong and graceful in a way that made his chest tighten. He didn't know when it happened, but he was suddenly very aware of how close they were, the heat of her body radiating just a few inches from his. His heart began to race, and he tried to ignore the pull he felt toward her. Tess turned to face him, her eyes searching his with an intensity that made his breath catch in his throat. She took a small step forward, closing the space between them. Her voice was barely above a whisper. Jake. His name on her lips was like a magnet, drawing him in. He could feel the tension between them, thick, palpable, and almost unbearable. Her breath was warm on his skin, her eyes locking with his. For a moment, everything else faded into the background. There was no fire, no ranch, no past, just the two of them. But Tess pulled back, a small sigh escaping her lips. I'm sorry. You don't have to apologize, Jake interrupted, his voice rough. He took a deep breath, trying to steady himself. I want this too, Tess. But I won't push you. I'm not going to rush you into anything. Her gaze softened, and she reached out, her hand brushing his cheek. I don't want you to think I'm pushing you away. I'm just not sure what I'm ready for yet. Jake's heart ached at the vulnerability in her voice. Take all the time you need, he said, his words filled with sincerity. I'm not going anywhere. I'll wait for you. As the days passed, the tension between them grew stronger. Every time they were close, every time their eyes met, Jake felt the pull. He wanted her. He had wanted her from the moment he'd seen her. But he couldn't push her, not after everything she'd been through. It was a quiet evening, the stars above them twinkling in the night sky. Tess sat beside him on the porch, her legs tucked underneath her as she gazed at the stars. Jake sat beside her, his hand resting casually on his knee, but the space between them felt charged, as if something was just waiting to happen. I've never really looked at the stars before, Tess said quietly, breaking the silence. I mean, I've seen them, but not like this. Not like they mean something. Jake didn't answer right away, his eyes scanning the sky. He felt a pang in his chest, a strange mixture of longing and relief. I guess it's easy to forget they're there when you're caught up in everything else. Tess turned her head to look at him, her eyes soft, vulnerable. I don't want to forget, Jake. I don't want to forget how to live, how to feel, how to trust. Jake's heart thudded in his chest, and before he knew it, he was leaning toward her, his breath shallow, his mind a whirlwind of emotions. She didn't move away. Instead, she stayed still, her eyes locked on his, giving him permission. Permission to cross the line they had both been towing for days. His lips found hers in the darkness, the kiss gentle at first, tentative, as if testing the waters. But then Tessa's hand slid up to his chest, pulling him closer. Jake's pulse spiked, and for a moment, all the weight of the world, the fire, the fear, the longing, seemed to vanish. All that was left was her. Tess. The kiss deepened, and Jake's hands roamed her back, pulling her closer. Her body pressed against his, soft and warm, and he could feel the tension slowly melting between them, replaced by a growing, undeniable heat. But just as he was about to take it further, Tess pulled back, her chest rising and falling as she tried to catch her breath. Her eyes were wide, her lips swollen from the kiss. Jake, I don't know if I can... He stopped her with a finger on her lips, his gaze soft but intense. You don't have to explain anything to me, Tess. I get it. We'll go at your pace. I won't rush you. Tess's eyes shimmered with something he couldn't quite name, something between gratitude and longing. Thank you, she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. Jake nodded, his chest tight with feelings he didn't know how to name. He leaned back against the porch, watching her, the space between them still charged with anticipation. The night felt heavier than it had before, filled with unspoken things, each of them waiting to be addressed, to be confronted. Jake had known this moment was coming, had known it was only a matter of time before the walls they had built between them would crumble. As the night wore on, Tess seemed to relax beside him, her hand finding his again. It was a small gesture, but it meant everything. They didn't need to speak. Everything they'd been holding back was there between them, in the warmth of their touch, in the tenderness of their shared silence. Jake, Tess whispered, her voice breaking the quiet stillness of the night. I'm scared. Jake's heart clenched. He turned to face her, his hand cupping her cheek once more. I know, Tess. I know, but you don't have to be scared anymore. I'm right here. I'm not going anywhere. Her eyes searched his, and for a moment, it felt as though time stopped. Everything in that moment was raw, vulnerable, but also full of promise. And then, with a deep breath, she closed the distance between them, her lips brushing his once more, this time with a quiet confidence that took Jake's breath away. It wasn't just a kiss anymore. It was the beginning of something new, something that couldn't be undone. Tessa's hand slipped behind his neck, pulling him closer, deepening the kiss. Jake responded without hesitation, his hand moving to the small of her back, feeling the curve of her body against him. The tension between them was finally released, and the world seemed to melt away as they gave into the inevitable pull they had both resisted for so long. The days following the kiss seemed to stretch out, as if time had slowed, giving them both the space to breathe and think. Every time Tess and Jake passed each other, the air crackled with unspoken words, the tension so thick it was almost tangible. The smallest touch, the brush of their fingers against each other, felt electric, charged with the weight of everything they had yet to say. Jake noticed the way Tessa's eyes would flicker toward him when she thought he wasn't looking, her lips slightly parted as if she were trying to say something, but then quickly turning her attention elsewhere. She was doing her best to hide the turmoil swirling inside her, but Jake saw it. The way her chest would rise and fall when they were near each other, the way she bit her lip when she was deep in thought. He had his own battles to fight, of course. His desire for her was undeniable, but he refused to let it overpower the care he felt for her, the respect he had for her boundaries. He wanted her, yes, but more than that, he wanted her trust. He wanted her to know that whatever they were about to do, it would be on her terms. Jake had never been one for words. In fact, he often felt more comfortable in the silence. But Tess made him want to speak, to share everything that had been hidden inside for so long. When they worked together, she would sometimes meet his gaze, and in those fleeting moments, it felt as if the world stopped. Everything went quiet, as if it were just the two of them, standing on the edge of something they both desperately wanted but weren't sure how to reach. It was late one evening, as they sat on the porch after a long day of work. The sky had turned a deep shade of indigo, and the air was cool, crisp against their skin. They sat side by side, not touching, yet everything between them seemed to hum with anticipation. Tess was the one to break the silence this time. "Jake," she started, her voice soft but heavy, "do you ever wonder if we're just running away from everything that happened? Running away from what we're really feeling?" Jake turned his head to look at her, his gaze intense. "You can't run from what's inside, Tess. But maybe we don't need to run anymore." He paused, the words heavy in his mouth. "Maybe it's time we face it, whatever's between us." Her eyes flickered to his, and for a moment, it felt like the whole world was holding its breath. Jake could see the struggle in her eyes. Part of her was still afraid, still hesitant. But the other part, the part that had been buried for so long, was beginning to rise to the surface. It was a moment of vulnerability, and they both felt it, the unspoken desire, the need for more, the emotional walls they had spent so long building now beginning to crack. Tess, her hands, trembling slightly, reached out to touch Jake's arm. It was a simple gesture, but to Jake, it felt like a declaration. Her fingers brushed his skin, and Jake's heart raced. He didn't move at first, unsure if she was just testing the waters or if she was ready for more. But when she didn't pull away, when she let her fingers linger on his arm, Jake knew it was time. He turned toward her fully, his gaze locking with hers. The space between them felt smaller now, as if all the years of longing and hesitation had somehow been erased in that single moment. "Tess, you don't have to say anything." Jake's voice was low, a mix of tenderness and the vulnerability he rarely allowed himself to show. "But I need to know if we're on the same page, if you're ready for this." Tessa's eyes flickered, uncertain at first, but the weight of his question lingered in the air, hanging between them. For a heartbeat, there was silence, raw and thick, full of unspoken words. Then, slowly, Tess nodded. Her fingers still rested gently on his arm, and Jake could feel the heat of her touch, like a quiet promise that this moment wasn't one-sided. "I've been scared, Jake," Tess admitted softly, her voice barely above a whisper. Scared of what it would mean, what would change between us. She swallowed, her chest rising and falling with a deep breath. "But I can't ignore how I feel anymore. I want this. I want you." Jake's breath caught in his throat at her words, a mix of relief and desire flooding through him. His hand reached up, cupping her cheek with a gentleness that mirrored the emotions swirling between them. He could feel the warmth of her skin beneath his palm, the slight tremor of her breath that matched his own. Her vulnerability was beautiful, and it only made him want her more. "I wanted you for so long, Tess," Jake said, his thumb brushing across her cheekbone as if trying to memorize the feel of her. "But I need you to know that it's not just about tonight. It's about you. About us." Tess closed her eyes for a moment, absorbing his words. When she opened them again, there was a clarity in her gaze that Jake hadn't seen before. It was the kind of clarity that told him she had made her choice, that the fear she had been carrying was starting to dissipate, replaced by something else, a sense of readiness. "Then show me," she said, her voice stronger now, full of quiet determination. "Show me how you feel, Jake. Don't hold back." The air around them seemed to still, the world outside fading into insignificance as they stood there, inches apart, the weight of their emotions pressing down on him like a heavy blanket. Jake's heart pounded in his chest as he leaned in, his lips brushing against hers in a kiss that was slow, deliberate, a kiss that spoke of everything they had both been too afraid to say until now. Tess responded to him immediately, her hands rising to rest on his chest, feeling the strong, steady beat of his heart beneath her palms. She wasn't afraid anymore. Not of him, not of what they could be, and certainly not of what they could become together. Jake's hands moved to her waist, pulling her closer as the kiss deepened. Their bodies aligned, and for a moment, everything felt perfect. She fit against him in a way that felt natural, as though they were meant to be like this. The desire between them was palpable, thickening the air with each passing second. He could feel the pulse of her heartbeat against his chest, could taste the need in her kiss, and it only made him want her more. His hand slid up her back, fingers grazing the skin beneath her shirt as he gently tugged it over her head. She wasn't hesitating now. Neither was he. For a moment, they simply stood there, taking in the presence of each other. Jake's eyes roamed over Tessa's body, his gaze lingering on her as if memorizing every inch of her. His hands moved slowly, almost reverently, over her skin, tracing the lines of her shoulders, down her arms, and across her back, pulling her closer. Tessa's hands were equally eager, roaming over his chest, her fingers skimming the muscles she had admired from afar, but never dared to touch. Now, she was free to explore, to claim what was rightfully hers. Her lips traced his jawline, her breath warm against his skin, sending shivers down his spine. Every movement between them was a slow unraveling of the barriers they had both so carefully constructed. It was a dance, a slow, careful waltz that built the tension between them with every touch. Each kiss, each caress, pulled them closer to the inevitable. But even as they moved toward that moment, they never lost sight of the emotional connection between them, the deep, unspoken understanding that this wasn't just about desire. It was about something more. Tess broke the kiss for a moment, her hands trembling slightly as she reached for the buttons on Jake's shirt. She wanted to see him, wanted to feel his skin against hers. And Jake, understanding what she needed, didn't hesitate to help her. He guided her hands, showing her that he was just as ready to give himself to her as she was to him. Their clothes fell away in the dim light of the room, discarded like the fears and doubts that had kept them apart for so long. But even as their bodies pressed together, Jake didn't rush. He was gentle, every move deliberate, every touch reverent. He wanted this moment to be perfect, to be something they both remembered forever. Tessa's hands found his hair, tugging him closer as she kissed him again, more urgently this time. She wanted him just as much as he wanted her. She could feel it in the way his body responded to hers, the way he held her with such intensity, as though he never wanted to let go. They moved together, bodies in sync, hearts beating faster with every moment. But it wasn't just about the physical connection. It was about the emotional one, too. Each touch, each kiss, was a reaffirmation of the trust they had begun to build, the trust that had led them to this moment of intimacy. Jake pulled back slightly, his breath ragged as he looked at her, his chest heaving with the effort to keep himself in check. Tessa's expression mirrored his own, desire and need mixed with something deeper, something more meaningful. "Are you sure?" Jake asked, his voice low and thick with emotion. He didn't want to rush her. He never wanted to make her feel like this was anything less than what it truly was, a moment of shared vulnerability and connection. Tessa's eyes shone with quiet strength, her lips curling into a soft, almost shy smile. "Yes," she whispered. "I'm sure." And with that, they both gave into the moment, the walls between them finally crumbling as they joined together. There was no need for words now, only the shared rhythm of their hearts and bodies, the silent understanding that they were exactly where they needed to be. The world outside didn't matter anymore. All that existed in that moment was Jake and Tess, entwined in a bond that was as emotional as it was physical, as fragile as it was powerful. And for the first time in what felt like forever, they both fell whole. As the sun began to rise, painting the sky in shades of pink and orange, Jake and Tess lay together, wrapped in the warmth of each other's embrace. The world outside was quiet, serene, and for the first time, so were they. There was no rush, no need to speak. The connection between them spoke louder than words ever could. Tess rested her head on Jake's chest, listening to the steady rhythm of his heartbeat. She felt safe there in his arms, and for the first time in a long time, she allowed herself to feel the peace she had been searching for. The uncertainties that had once clouded her mind seemed distant now, replaced by the comforting certainty that whatever happened next, they would face it together. Jake kissed the top of her head, his hand gently stroking her hair. "You know," he murmured, "this is only the beginning, Tess. I'm not going anywhere. Not now. Not ever." Tess smiled, her eyes still closed as she nestled closer to him. "I know," she whispered, her voice soft but filled with the same quiet strength that had carried her this far. "And I'm not going anywhere either." As they lay there, wrapped in each other's arms, the future seemed a little brighter. The uncertainty of the past had faded, replaced by the promise of something real, something worth fighting for. Together, they had found something neither of them had expected. Not just love, but partnership built on trust, understanding, and a shared journey toward healing and connection. And as the morning light poured in through the window, they both knew that whatever came next, they would face it together.